Which BB quote do you find yourself using frequently in your everyday life? Circulating the internet, how did your game change? I'm going to say for the better, when you joined the mafia with Matt and I. Which BB quote is your go-to for everyday use? I find myself saying, "What's wrong with Angela?" and "You must be like, silly" very often. Honorable mention for real cute. And I can't think of any older ones right now. Recency bias, but fucking Bowie Jane has been used around my household in response to shifting blame. Who left the light on in the living room? Fucking Bowie Jane. And when a celebrity does something problematic, and I know one of my friends is a fan, I like to tease them by asking them, "This is the one that you lay with? This one right here." And every time I lend a key to a friend while we're out, "Give me that key, bitch" only happens once or twice a year, but it comes naturally and I live for it. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. On point, it's Sophia. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Keep watching and hit the subscribe button. So let's start. On the other hand, ranking the Bb25 house guests by how cool it would be to have a beer with them. Player discussion. Kirsten 6. I don't know how fun this would be because she wasn't around very long, but she seemed okay. Relly 7. I honestly think she would have good drink recommendations because she's a bartender. Moved her down from 8 because she is a Nashville bartender that probably only serves beer and Jack. Hism 6. Hism probably has some crazy stories, seems fun. Red 5. I don't think our personalities would mesh. Izzy 6.5. I feel like Izzy would be a good wingman. Jared 5. I would like to ask him about going to Survivor stuff. Mikol 7. I'm really interested in what DC politics are like behind closed doors. Cameron 5.5 seems kind of plain. I bet he has some cool army stories. Corey 7.5. I want to argue with him about stuff. I think it would be fun. Blue 0. I think I would leave the bar. America 7.5. I think she would be one of those people who is super fun to be around. Siri 9. Siri has had such a crazy life. I would just listen to her talk about things she has done. Felica 10. Legendary personality. Changed from 8 after my mistake was pointed out. Bowie 3. Can I try Foster's beer for the first time with a genuine Australian person? Matt 7. I have a lot of questions about what it's like to be an Olympic athlete. Jag 6. I'm definitely asking him to pick up the check. And Kirsten is messy in general, so I could see her being messy drunk, but in a fun way like America or Riley. Also, I don't know about this cast, but one time I had a bottle of Fireball on a school bus with BB10 Steven and some others. I did a shot with Danny, Dom, and Loan. He didn't have magical powers. That night was probably the weirdest I've ever had. BB11 Casey was telling myself, Randy Bailey from Survivor, Chase Rice from Survivor, and some others about going to an underwear party or something with Steven. It was like 10 years ago, so the details are foggy. It was hilarious. Russell Hantz was there, flirting with every reality TV woman he saw. I played cornhole with Hayden against 2 guys from The Amazing Race, I forget who. Another fun time was playing beer pong with Fairplay. Man, I miss going to reality show events like that. And unpopular opinion, but Suri would be a pass for me. She seemed so negative and unenergetic. I'm sure she's different outside the house, but so is everyone else. We can only go by what we saw on TV. My top 2 would be Matt, Jack, and America. Maybe throw in Mama Fi for the giggles. And Hism was at a different table to listen to him laugh. On the other hand, Jason Vai's gratitude. Because of Siri on Bb25, I became interested in Big Brother and have since binge-watched every previous season, with the exception of the last few episodes of Bb13. Jason was one of my favorite players on Bb3, so I was disappointed to learn that he would never play again because he was so intelligent and endearing. But seeing him now at the Bb25 after party, taking pictures with the contestants, and just seemingly looking like a great guy makes me so happy beyond belief. I don't know if he's been a prominent figure in the fandom, but he is lovely, and I just wanted to take a moment to appreciate such a nice guy. And he does seem nice. You can get more content with Jason on the Secret Alliance podcast. And he's attended various reality events over the years, but he sort of made a resurgence in the wider community over the past few years after starting his own BD podcast, Secret Alliance. He seems like an all-around great person and is definitely one of the best players to never win the game. In Bb25, he did a great job of creating ties with Danielle, the guys, Josh, Roddy, and Eric, and the girls, Chai, Lisa, and Amy, which kept him off the block until the end. People often also forget that for a lot of the game, he was able to get Danielle to do what he wanted as opposed to vice versa, especially regarding Roddy. He also entered the F3 with essentially a 2/3 chance of winning the game. With that said, he did have some blatant flaws, game-wise. First, he looked into the lens of the DR camera and said that he knew he couldn't beat Danielle, but still wanted to take her to F2. This shows not only a lack of awareness regarding the jury, as he would have easily beaten Danielle, but also a willingness to lose. Getting rid of Amy over Lisa wasn't as bad for Jason as it was for Danielle, but I do think it was still the wrong move for Jason, especially considering the competition rationale that Jason and Danny used to justify it, and Jason knew how close Lisa was to Danny. And Jason is one of my all-time favorite house guests. Truly an underrated player. As harsh and as terrible as it is, "You should have used the veto" is one of my favorite moments. However, did Phil and Nick truly not realize they would be on the show together? When I watch BBCN4 again, they really play up on the brothers' ignorance of one another's impending presence in the house. Are they being truthful, or is this all for show? I'm not sure how you could prevent them or their relatives from discussing it with one another. If the production staff was really surprised, then that's really amazing. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the producers told them only one of them would make it into the house. So they genuinely shocked to see they both made it in. And maybe this has got to be the only way they do it. Even if Nick and Phil were estranged, no idea if they were or not, you'd think they both might have told the same mutual relative about the fact they were on the shortlist for BB, and that person could figure it out and tell them both. Also, this is how I recall it. They were told they would find out which one made it based on which one they called from their isolation room. On the other hand, why is BB1 that bad? Past discussion. People always say it's extremely boring and slow-paced. Well, it is, but it's honestly not the most boring thing I've ever seen. I have crippling ADHD, and I get bored by many, many shows and movies. I couldn't even watch the first 20 minutes of Batman vs. Superman. However, I watched the entirety of BB1 because, like I said earlier, it's not that bad. I've seen all 25 seasons, and I think BB1 holds its own weight. And here's why it's worth your time. First, it's literally the first season. Will wasn't the first winner. I want to avoid spoilers here, so I'll say that the person who won BB1 was actually the one who put himself in front of others in the game and did what he had to do to win. Second, Chicken George. He slowly falls into a pit of insanity throughout the season, and I'm serious when I say that of all 25 seasons, nothing has genuinely scared me or felt like a horror movie would, aside from the deterioration of Chicken George. They all nominate him at the end, and he's just sitting there, laughing and saying it's okay for an uncomfortably long period of time while everyone just watches him. It's creepy. He's also paranoid constantly, cosplays another house guest sexually, rubs his man titties in the diary room, and almost gets the whole house to quit the game. His entire family also votes for Brittany over him after getting a whole state to campaign for him. If you liked him in Season 7, you will here too. Thirdly, Jamie is entertaining to watch too. She's obviously faking her own personality throughout the game, and at one point she chooses to get a visit from a Hollywood producer over her own mother. Fourthly, the constant mental breakdowns of Brittany and Josh, also their unhinged love triangle with Jordan, who is always talking about how bad she wants Josh to bang her. Fifthly, Will he's starting arguments in every scene he's in, and he's iconic. I don't know why they never brought this king back. He's one of the funniest MS to ever play. My favorite house guest of the season after Eddie. Sixthly, speaking of Eddie, he only has one leg, so that makes him the first disabled person to play Big Brother. It's pretty cool to hear his story. Seventhly, the producers are assholes, and they're really rude and snappy with the house guests. It's funny to see them constantly at odds. Eighth, while it's true there aren't any gameplay elements, the drama feels like a season of the real world. Also, there are competitions involving rewards. If you've seen BB1, tell me your favorite parts about it and your least favorite parts. I think for everyone, it's worth a solid watch. And Karen losing it and announcing she wanted a divorce on the show, and then they interviewed her husband. If I remember right, she even moved in with Brittany after the show. I think afterwards she did end up going back to her husband, though. And my favorite was when they had the grocery budget and forgot to buy toilet paper, and fans snuck onto the lot and threw toilet paper over the wall to them. The fans got to be so much more involved in the first season. I also liked that Big Brother didn't act like a friend to them in the diary room. It didn't feel like it was manipulated. It's totally different than what newer fans know as BB, but it is really worth watching. Also, my first kid was born right before Big Brother Season 1 started, so I was home on paternity leave, and we had just gotten high-speed internet. I spent so many hours watching the live feeds while trying to stay sane with a baby that didn't want to sleep. It will always be one of my favorite seasons, partially due to that. Yes, it is very different from every other season. It is nowhere near the same game as it is now. But it was still fun, especially if you watch the live feeds. I think that many of the people who disliked the first season based only on the aired episodes would have a higher opinion of it if they had access to the feeds. Nobody at the time had any idea what it would become, and they did not act for the cameras after about the first week. It was a very interesting season, and the best part of BB1 was the free AOL feeds. We had them on a lot. It wasn't like modern-day BB. The contestants weren't tirelessly whispering strategies. Instead, there were many challenges that kept them busy, and they almost never blacked out, not even during competitions. During finale night, it was pretty cool to see Julie Chen talking to the contestants off-air. Also, Chiquita. We have always had pugs because of BB1. We're on our fourth. The Finding Chiquita challenge was epic. The production values of the show were awful, for sure. On the other hand, how many rock, paper, scissors F3s have there been? Rock, paper, scissors. Everyone has one person they can beat, and one they can't. Like, has there ever been a final three where person A wins against person B wins against person C, and person C wins against person A? I'm trying to think of any, but I can't. And BBCA and 3 is the only one I can think of. Each juror has 2 or 3 locked votes, and each of these voting blocks has a different second choice. I feel like the only one that might have that would be season 20, because all 3 players were above average, but usually there's one GOAT. And there's only 2 that I would entertain, and just for the record, I personally am not sold on either of them, but I do think there's some interesting scenarios to consider. Also, keep in mind, these both rely on different jury formats than exist today. First is BB2. We know we'll beat Nicole in F2. If we assume it's Monica and Will in the F2, I assume because Monica takes Will, but I'm not sure it matters much. I think Monica has the slight edge mainly due to the 9 Elephants incident. For those who weren't around then, go back and dig up Kent's statement where he claims, pre-finale, that he'd likely vote for Will over Monica. However, if it's Nicole and Monica in F2, again, I'm not too sure it matters who takes who. I do think there's some chance Nicole wins. In this scenario, Will is out of the house for about a week. And for those not around back then, Will was adored by much of the public back then, or as much as early reality TV fans could adore someone. I think that if Will wants to, he can rally Chilltown and Cheryl together and get the crucial 5th, maybe 6th, vote to get Nicole the win, based on Nicole playing the game more in line with how he saw it than Monica did. And I assume both vote cancellations would hit. Krista was, of course, close to Monica, but we saw how she folded for Boogie. Hardy was obviously tied to Nicole as well. This is to say, I think Will outside the house could have potentially beat Monica's 9 Elements storyline, where he couldn't have from inside the house. This is all very speculative, of course, but still worth more consideration than all the other F3s in my opinion. The second is Bb6. This one is even weirder for several different reasons. So we saw Maggie beat Yvette in F2. If Yvette throws to Janelle, Maggie goes to the jury house for a couple of days. Here, I think Yvette beats Janelle. Now, years later, both April and James have claimed they would have voted for Janie in such scenario. But I plain don't believe James, and I think that with Maggie in the jury house, she'd control April even if April didn't want to vote for Yvette, and Yvette would only need one of those 2 votes to win. Note that this would likely require Yvette throwing to Janie and not cutting Maggie herself. Now let's look at Janie/Maggie in F2. If it's Janie who takes Maggie, I can believe James voting for Janelle, along with Howie and Rachel. In this case, however, Maggie is not in the jury house. Yvette is, and that might just give enough leeway for April to flip her vote to Janelle. April, of course, really disliked Yvette near the end and was hurt by Maggie, but could rarely stand up to Maggie face to face. Without the domineering Maggie there, I could see April being swayed by the other side. I don't think Jen flips either way since April barely knew her coming into the house lol. If it's somehow Maggie that takes Janie, then it risks being even worse for Maggie. And for whatever it's worth, you have to analyze all this against the background of Howie, in the real timeline, accidentally voting for Maggie over Yvette. Meaning, in whatever scenario, maybe he messes things up lol. Again though, these are just fun exercises. I think there's a good argument against all my hypotheticals. I just think those 2 are really the only ones worth hypothesizing about.